This monster would murder 4 little girls throughout Tokyo. He drank their blood, ate parts of their bodies, and even mailed their bones back to their parents. This creature was obsessed with anime, horror, and violence. And when fantasy wasn't enough for him, he would turn real life into his very own horror movie. They called him the Otaku Killer, but his real name was Tsutomu Miyazaki. And what he did, it's gonna haunt you. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome to another true crime and makeup episode. Oh yeah. If you are new here, hi, my name is Anna. I post true crime content every single Wednesday and Sunday, so if true crime is your jam, I highly suggest you subscribe, get the notification bell on, because I'm here for you every single week. And if it's no asking too much, if you could please like and comment, share the video if you feel obliged. It really means a lot. Doing these things really helps boost me out onto the YouTube algorithm and helps me toward my dreams of doing this full time and providing content for you constantly. But today we are covering one of the most bone-chilling, haunting and disturbing cases that has ever come out of Japan, and that is the case of Tsutomu Miyazaki. He would be known as the Otaku Killer, the Human Dracula, the Little Girl Murderer. And by the end of this video, you will understand why he had all of these terrifying titles. There is going to be very extreme, strong themes in this video. There's talks of necrophilia, mutilation, psychological torment, abduction, murder. So if you do feel as though you might not be in the right headspace to listen to these sort of themes and topics today, please click off the video. I'll have another video out on Wednesday for you that might be better suited, or I'll link some down below for you to watch instead. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the horrifying case of Tsutomu Miyazaki. Oh my goodness. Scotland is experiencing a heat wave and nothing is happening that's good in my hair. So I'm embracing like the natural curls and waves, but I mean literally no looking good. So we'll ignore that and we're just going to dive right on into the case, because this guy, this Temu version of Voldemort, honestly, we are in for a journey. So today's freak of the week, we've got Tsutomu Miyazaki. And this guy, he is a complete, utter loser, weirdo cretin, and we're going to dive into all the details in this case. And, you know, I'm not really shocked by what we talk about anymore, right? Because a lot of these animals, these wild monsters, they're cut from the same cloth. But sometimes there is a case that just leaves the flabbergasted, and this is one of them. So Tsutomu Miyazaki, he was born on August 21st of 1962, and he was born in Itsukaichi, which is a district in Tokyo, Japan. Now, he was a premature baby, and when he was born with a deformity which is known as epiphyseal dysplasia. This basically meant that Tsutomu's wrist bones was completely fused to his forearm. So he had trouble like moving his hands upwards or rotating them. Well, I mean, in fact, he never had trouble with it. He just couldn't do it. Now, this resulted in his hand having like this stunted claw shape to it. Sorry, I just realised my straw from my iced coffee was in frame. My little sister works as a barista and she's literally like the best. Like iced coffees, 10/10. And I'm sure every single one of us here can agree that children, they are brutal. They'll just say whatever they want to say. They can be so nasty, especially when there's something about another child that makes them different. If they have some sort of deformity, a disability, a speech impediment, you know, all this stuff makes them targets for bullies, which is just horrible, because being different is what makes you special. That makes you unique, and it is not something to be bullied. That person cannot help it. They can't fix it. And not that you should ever comment on anyone's appearance, but I truly believe if what you're going to point out to someone, they can't fix that within 10 seconds, you don't point it out. Now, the bullying towards Tsutomu was honestly just relentless. These kids would just go and go and go at him. He became withdrawn, he was resentful, and he just didn't want to be around anyone else whatsoever. With that, he would become extremely isolated, and some say that's through choice, but I mean, if everyone's making fun of you, do you really have any other choice than to keep yourself isolated? It wasn't just Tsutomu thinking that he was an outsider. He was told that he was the outsider, he was the outcast that no one wanted to hang around with. Any social events that popped up, Tsutomu took nothing to do with them. He didn't want to be involved with anyone. He didn't try and create friendships outside of those who were bullying him because he just believed that everyone was the same. Now, when it came to school, if there was ever class photos being done, or if he just happened to be in the background of a photo, he would immediately hide his hands inside his jumper. He was so ashamed and so embarrassed of something he couldn't help. He felt that he had to hide them. And it's such a shame, right? Because he's so ashamed and so embarrassed of his hands. But it turns out that he is a very, very talented drawer. He was incredibly artistic. He would draw anime characters, and it was an area that he really thrived in. So the very thing that he hated about himself really ended up being his biggest gift. Now, not only would Tsutomu draw in his spare time, he would also read a lot of comics. He was kind of comic book obsessed, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Now, when it came to Tsutomu's family life, it was pretty dysfunctional, I'm not going to lie to you. The family was very wealthy, they were very influential in the Itsukaichi district, but ultimately that wasn't what Tsutomu cared about. He wanted a family that loved and appreciated him, and instead he felt that he had a family that loved wealth and appreciated material goods, rather than their own son. Tsutomu's father owned a regional newspaper, and he believed that when he retired, that Tsutomu should be the one to take over the family business. He should carry on that legacy. But Tsutomu just had no interest in that. He didn't want to do a newspaper. He wanted to be an artist or a photographer or designing comic books, which I suppose goes back to being an artist, I don't know. But running a newspaper, that just wasn't Tsutomu's jam. He was not up for that whatsoever. The other thing that really got to Tsutomu is that he has this congenital deformity, and he wants to confide in people about how this makes him feel, why he's treated like an outsider. But his dad completely denied his condition. If Tsutomu wanted to speak about it, his dad would just brush him off and emotionally distance himself. He had no one to confide in. He couldn't confide in his mother either. She was too busy favouring the younger siblings and the older sibling. This very dynamic is the thing that made Tsutomu feel as though he couldn't stand his younger sisters or his older sister. Because it was very clear that they were favoured because they were normal and because they loved the same stuff. They loved wealth, they loved materialistic things, they loved money. And listen, I would love a wee bit more money, but it's definitely not the be all and end all. Tsutomu's younger sisters, they completely despised him. They did not give him the time of day. They just wanted nothing to do with him. And then his older sister, they had a bit of a closer bond, but they were not by any means close. Like, they were closer, but not actually close. The only person that Tsutomu had in his life that he felt genuinely cared for him was his grandfather. His grandfather showed interest in how he was doing. How was school? Are you still being bullied? Are you happy? Is there anything I can do? He seemed genuinely concerned and interested in Tsutomu's life. And his granddad meant everything to him. And listen, Tsutomu, he's quiet, he's reserved, he's shy, and at this point, he's starting to become a bit of a weirdo, but we're gonna get there, okay? But despite this quietness, shyness, this reserve that he had, he was incredibly intelligent. He would really work hard in school. He was actually within the top 10 in his entire school when it came to grades. He ranked so high in elementary school all the way up to high school. But then suddenly, he jumps on the struggle bus. I don't know why, right? But the struggle bus pulls up and he hops on. The grades, they plummet. He goes from being in the top of his class to very much near the bottom of his class. In a class of 56 people, he was now ranking 40th. Whereas before, he'd be down in the top 5 to 10. I can only imagine what he was ranking in the entire school now. And because his grades have plummeted so much and so quickly without any real explanation, or at least not a public explanation, because trust me, you wouldn't go and tell your school teachers what he's been up to, but because of this, the university that he had dreamed of getting into, the Meiji University, which was a prestigious school, he no longer could get in. He didn't have the qualifications, he didn't have the academic performance, and they didn't want him anymore. So the dreams are low-key crushed and he has to find somewhere else to go, so he decides he's going to go to a junior college. Whilst he's here, he is going to learn to be a photographer, a photo technician, and he's really thriving, he's really enjoying it. But this is when this weirdo really starts exhibiting a weirdoness. Because in his school, you get assignments, you get projects that you need to go and do. And when he was on a photography assignment, he decided that he's going to go to the tennis court and he is going to crotch shot all the female tennis players. Crotch pics. Like, what assignment is that? If a teacher assigned that, let's get him sacked. Do you think that's going to get you the grades that you need? You freak. Now, around this very same time, Tsutomu, he becomes obsessed with slasher films, horror manga, and anime. And slasher films and anime, listen, I'm sure we all like it. I love a good slasher film. But I don't think I would love it to the degree that he loves it. And the horror manga, it wasn't just like horror manga, it was horror manga. And it was worrying. Oh, and how could I forget that he was also obsessed with pornography? Yep. He didn't just like it, he didn't use it a few times a week. He was consuming that like it was a season of Friends. Back-to-back episodes. But he gets to a point where, you know, the porn's just, it's no blowing his hair back anymore. He feels like it's just no working for him. It's not, you know, giving him the release he needs. He decides that he needs to switch over to something else, and in 1984, this is when this evil cretin discovered child porn. He would amass a collection of 6,000 tapes, well, just under 6,000, but a huge amount of tapes. Now, some of this was anime, some of this was horror, some of it was child exploitation movies, and some of it was his own snuff films that he created. Again, this guy, he's consuming them every single minute of every single day, and he's masturbating along to them. But he would have these masturbatory rituals that he would carry out that were consumed by murder and domination. This guy, it gets to a point where he's in like full-fledged vampire mode, right? Because this guy, he sleeps all day. Why, you might ask? Because he's up all night getting his jollies to his tapes. The guy has had so much activity and physical release during the night that he cannot keep his eyes open during the day. For now. You know, eventually something else takes his fancy and he becomes a daytime person again. But for now, we're very much in his vampire era. And there was no socialisation of him at this point either, not even with his family, not with the outside world, which is to be expected because no one actually likes him. But it was almost like he became fully immersed in this fantasy murder world that he was creating. But for him, this fantasy, it would soon start to seep and blend into his very reality. Devastatingly for Tsutomu, in 1988, that is when his grandfather would pass away, the only man he's ever known to show him any support, any care, any compassion. He was now gone. And it's sad, it's really sad. We all know what it's like to lose a grandparent or to lose someone who really made us feel special and cared about. But Tsutomu knew how to make things really strange really quick. And he actually exhumes some of his grandfather's ashes. He then ate them and claimed that his grandpa would now live inside him forever. Clearly, little bro doesn't know how the digestive system works and that grandpa was probably going to come out another end. I know everyone deals with grief differently, but I don't think that eating your dead relative is the way to do it. So the one man in his life that he respected and cared what he thought of him, he's gone. And Tsutomu, now he can kind of do whatever he wants. You know, Grandpa's going to live through him. I don't think Grandpa would approve of these activities, but this is what Tsutomu would go on to do. But the thing is, it wasn't just when his granddad passed away that he was getting up to no good. He was getting up to no good whilst Grandad was still here. In 1984, he started practicing voyeurism. He would sneak into houses where he knew that young children were staying. He would sneak into their bedrooms, steal their underwear. He would spy on them whilst they're in the shower. He would try and snap photos and videos. And not only this, but this weirdo, this cretin, he started spying on his younger sisters whilst they were in the shower. And he's got a bloody cheek, right? Because see, when his little sisters confronted him and told their mum, he would brutally attack them. And I mean physically hurt his little sisters. And not only this, but he would also attack his own mum. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want you spying on me whilst I shower. Is there any need to attack me because I've told you that's not appropriate? And then when he can't spy on his little sisters anymore because they're aware of it, he starts to lurk around outside schools and parks for hours on end. See, he's becoming a daytime person now when the children are out and about. So he's outside schools and parks. He's got like a telephoto lens and he is just zooming in and watching these children as they play. It just honestly turns my stomach how there is monsters like this in the world. At one point, there was a young girl sitting on a bench and she heard a noise coming from underneath her where she was sitting. When she looked down, she was absolutely terrified to see this man laying on the bench beneath her, videoing up her skirt. A young girl, a child. However, sadly in this case, there was no charges filed against him and he was just free to roam. Something else that his classmates had noted was his obsession with everything surrounding death. He had started writing individuals in the class notes about death, decay, pain, decomposition, and even with all of that, the worst was yet to come. So on the 22nd of August of 1988, Tsutomu, he would commit his very first known abduction and murder. Mari Kono, she was just 4 years old when she would vanish while she was playing with a friend. 4 years old. Tsutomu had lured 4-year-old Mari to his vehicle, and once she was there, he was able to get her into this vehicle. Of course he was. She was only a 4-year-old little girl. She couldn't fight him back. Once in the vehicle, Tsutomu had then drove them to this wooded location, and in this wooded location there was a bridge that went over it, and the car was parked underneath the bridge. Now Tsutomu, he sits with Mari for around 30 minutes, and then he suddenly unleashes this brutal and horrific attack on her. Tsutomu would murder Mari, and when she was dead, he then raped her. After this, he then stripped Mari of her clothes, he dumped her body in the nearby woods, and then he took her clothes home as if they were some kind of trophy to him. Now, several weeks would go by and Mari's family, friends, the authorities, they're conducting as many searches as they possibly could to try and bring this 4-year-old girl home. Was she lost? Was she hurt? Did someone take her? Whilst they're out conducting these searches, desperately trying to find this little girl, Tsutomu, he's going back to the wooded site where he threw away her body. He's just going along, examining her body, examining the level of decomposition that she is going through. And on one of these visits, he decides that she is decomposed enough, so he cuts off her hands and her feet. He takes them home and he stores them in her closet for later use. Yeah, you know exactly where this is going. And just when you think this couldn't possibly get any worse, it absolutely does. Because Tsutomu, he would call this distraught, grieving, heartbroken family, and he would just breathe heavily down the line. They're begging the other person on the line to answer them. Where is their daughter? Tell them. And he's just heavy breathing before hanging up. He did this so often to this family that when their phone rung, they wouldn't want to answer it. He was so sick twisted and disturbed in his mind, he kept calling and calling and calling, one after the other, until they answered out of pure frustration. And he would just do the same again. And unbelievably, it gets even worse, what he would do to this family. When he went back to Mary's body, he would burn her body, and then once she was burned, he would grind her bones down to ash. When he done this, he put her ashes in a box alongside some of her teeth, a photo of her clothes, and there was also a postcard that said, "Mary cremated, bones, investigate, prove." Could you imagine being this family, receiving something so heinous, so horrific, knowing that something horrifying has happened to your little baby? It's honestly just so... it's just so vile, I don't even have the words for it. This monster wanted them to know what he'd done. He wanted to haunt them, even after their daughter had been murdered. And then we have 7-year-old Misami Yoshizawa. She was walking home when she would be abducted and murdered by Tsutomu on October the 3rd of 1988. Tsutomu had spotted Misami when she was walking along the road, and he decides that he likes the look of her. He's going to pull up alongside her and offer her a lift. Misami is a trusting young girl. She believes that she can trust adults because adults are good, adults protect you. But in this case, her trust would be so misplaced and abused. Once Misami was in this vehicle with this monster, he proceeded to drive her straight to the same location where he murdered Mary. Once they get there, he murders this little girl straight away. He sexually assaults her dead body, and then he strips her naked and takes her clothes home with him. And by this time, as you can imagine, parents in the area that had young little girls, they were panicking. Who was this monster? Where does this monster live? Where is he going to strike next? What child is going to be next? And they were all trying to come together and work out a way that they could effectively protect these children every moment of every single day. And as always, the media, they get their hands on the story of these murders and they provide him a nickname. They had nicknamed him the Otaku Killer, or the Otaku Murder. And the crimes themselves, they were being dubbed the Little Girl Murders. Honestly, it really me off when they're always out here providing murderers a nickname, because if we're going to give them a nickname, can we not be like smelly weirdo Tsutomu Voldemort? Something that's going to take their ego down a peg or two, not something that makes them sound notorious. And then just 2 months later, on December the 12th of 1988, 4-year-old Erika Namba, she would be abducted when she was on her way home from a friend's house. Tsutomu, he had forced this little 4-year-old into his car. She didn't want to go. She kicked, she screamed, she fought. But ultimately, again, she could not overpower a grown man. He gets her in the vehicle, he drives her to an empty parking lot in Naguri. He then forced this little girl to strip herself naked and take photos of her own body. He then murdered this little girl. He tied her hands and her feet behind her back, covered her in a bed sheet. He disposed of her clothes in nearby woods, and her body would be dumped in an adjoining car park, where it would be found 3 days later. And as we know by now, with this vile, vile creature, he can't just murder and be done with it. He needs to torture the family even more. And so on December the 20th of 1988, Erika's family would also receive a postcard with a haunting message on it. The message was created out of cut out words from a magazine, and it said, "Erika, cold, throat, rest, death." And if you're thinking, oh my god, this sounds like something out of a horror movie, you wouldn't be far wrong, because this is exactly what this monster was trying to do when he was murdering these young girls. He was creating his own snuff films. Tsutomu then had taken a bit of a long break. His next murder would be recorded on June the 6th of 1989. And this murder was of 5-year-old Ayako Nomoto. This monster had been able to convince this little girl to pose for photos for him. Once they had done some photos, he says, "Oh, come back to my car, we'll do some photos in there." And as soon as she was back at this vehicle, she would be murdered. Tsutomu would take Ayako's body back to his apartment, where he would keep her there for 2 days. He would engage in sexual acts with this little girl's body. He was taking photos of her. He was even videoing her body in various different sexual positions. Once her body had started to heavily decompose, this is when Tsutomu had decided it was time to dismember her. He would then throw her torso away in a cemetery and her head in nearby hills. He just treated these beautiful little girls like they were trash that could just be discarded so carelessly. However, Tsutomu decided that he would keep her hands and he would keep her feet. He had even drank blood from her hands and feet and even ate some of them. Tsutomu, at this point, for some reason, panic starts to set in. He's losing confidence in himself and his murdering abilities. He starts thinking, what if the police find her torso? What if they find her head? What if it can be linked back to me? He decides he's going to drive to the cemetery. He gets her torso, puts it in the car. He then decides to drive to the nearby hills, retrieves her head, puts it in the car, and brings her entire body back to his apartment and just stores her in his closet. In this weirdo's journals, he had said that the murders he was committing was actually artistic expression. This is just how he expressed himself. And he said that children were so innocent and so pure that they could easily become part of him. Nothing about you is innocent or pure. You are a spawn of Satan himself. You should be burning in the fiery pits of hell. People should be taking off your limbs and eating them in front of you. Actually, no, let's make you eat your own limbs. How about that? Now, the police at this point, they had actually been able to identify Mary Connell's remains from the box that had been sent to her parents. Now, Tsutomu can't help himself. He wants to see his work get recognition. He watches the police announcement and he decides that he is going to send the most horrifying, bone-chilling, disturbing confession letter to her parents because it still wasn't enough for him. He still wasn't done with them. Now, I am going to read to you a bit of this confession letter that this evil monster sent because it's hard to even picture the level of depravity of someone to send something like this, but with what he said, sending that to a family who's already distraught, it is just a whole other level of evil. So he had said, "Before I knew it, the child's corpse had gone rigid. I wanted to cross her hands over her breasts, but they wouldn't budge. Pretty soon, the body gets red spots all over it. Big red spots, like the Hinumaru flag. After a while, the body is covered with stretch marks. It was so rigid before, but now it feels like it's full of water. And it smells. How it smells. Like nothing you've ever smelled in this whole wide world." Could you imagine receiving that description of your child's decomposing body? If you've lost someone, you probably already have that thought, how did they look at the time? How did they, that's like a part of grief that some people go through. You start to wonder how they looked, what would they look like, and it plays on your mind and it haunts you. Could you imagine receiving that detail off of this monster who took your child's life, who watched her body go through all of those stages? Now, you will be relieved and happy to know that we're going to start talking about Voldemort's downfall, okay? And this couldn't come quick enough in this case, because the minute I started reading it, I was like, I just want to know what happens to him. I need to know that there's some form of justice for these beautiful young girls. July the 23rd of 1989, Tsutomu, he would spot two young sisters playing in the park. There was an older sister and a younger sister. Now, of course, for Tsutomu, the sicko, the younger sister always seems more his vibe. He was somehow able to scare these sisters in a way that they had separated, and he would turn all his attention on the little sister. This monster had convinced this little girl to strip naked in front of him so he could take nude photographs of her. So he's doing this. He thinks he's getting away with this. He knows it's a bit risky, but ultimately, it looks like he's gotten away with it. But what he didn't know is this little girl's older sister, her big sister, she ran home, told her father that her and her sister had been separated, and this man was convincing her little sister to strip naked. The father immediately bolts to the park. When he gets there, he would see his little girl in the back of Tsutomu's car. She's naked and he's photographing her. Immediately, he's in dad mode, he's in protector mode. He rips this weaselly little man from the vehicle, throws him to the ground, and then he grabs his daughter out of the vehicle. Thank goodness his daughter's safe at this point. But Tsutomu, he's ran away on foot, but he's left his car behind. Now the father, he's already called the police, he has identified the attacker, what he looks like, the car that he's driving, gives him all the details he possibly can. And not too long after, Tsutomu has circled back. He's on his way back to the park so he can pick up his car. Are you stupid? Do you think this guy is not going to phone the police on you? So this idiot, he's back in the park and he's walking over to his car, and then suddenly he's ambushed by the police, who arrest him immediately. Now, not only that, all these murders have been going on, okay? They decide that, you know, this guy's been looking at young girls. This could be the guy who's killing. This could be the little girl murderer. So they order a search of his apartment, but nothing would prepare them for what they would find. So I do have the list here of what they found in his apartment. I've noted it down, so I'm going to read it just to make sure I get it completely correct. But when they searched his apartment, they found 5,763 videotapes, horror, anime and porn. Now, there was also footage of the victims and also footage of him abusing their corpses. There was even photographs of the victims before and after their murders. Now, they had also discovered pieces of the victim's clothing. There was body parts in his closet alongside the decomposing body of his fourth victim. Now, there was multiple journals, and each of these journals had some form of detail regarding the murders. During the police questioning that this monster underwent, he pulled the Patricia card, the Patricia defence. You know, it wasn't me, it was Patricia. Apart from in this case, it wasn't Patricia. He said he had an alternate personality called Ratman. Ratman, no Batman, Ratman. And I mean, yeah, this guy's pretty much a rat. But he said it was this dark figure that would take over and cause him to commit murder. I mean, listen, I'll give you a 6 out of 10 on originality. Ratman, you know, first time I've heard this defence, but of course, because he's claiming that there's this alternate personality, they've got to do some kind of psychiatric evaluations on him to see if this could be true. And when these are conducted by multiple people, there is some mixed results. Some had declared that he was legally insane and diagnosed him with DID, dissociative identity disorder, while many others had argued that his murders were calculated and that he was fully aware what he was doing when he was murdering these children. And his courtroom demeanour throughout his trial was cold, bored, sometimes even amused. Something was really tickling him during the trial. And this man, who has basically said that his father was the worst man to walk this earth, he starts phoning his dad. He wants his dad to visit him. He wants his dad to pay his legal fees. And his dad told him, no chance. On your bike. You're not getting a cent of my money. And his own father was so haunted by the crimes that his own son had went on to commit that he actually killed himself in 1994. He could not live with what his son had done. And quite honestly, I could not believe when I read this, but this evil monster's trial lasted 7 years. 7 years. That is a long, long time. It's a long time for the family to be going through this and to have to relive all these details and not getting the closure they need for that amount of time. Then on April the 14th of 1997, this evil monstrosity of a man, human, he's not really though, he's just an evil cretin monster, but he would be sentenced to death via hanging. Now, the whole time that he's in the court, he's just sketching away in his little sketchbook. He could not give a tiny rat's ass what's going on. And even when his death sentence was announced, he showed no emotion whatsoever. He just kept scribbling away in his little sketchbook, doing his little drawings. Tsutomu knew he would spend 11 years on death row. The whole time he was just watching TV, drawing manga, and he would rarely speak or associate with anyone else in the prison because, let's be honest, no one likes child murderers or rapists. Honestly, let's just jump right to the good news. This guy, he was executed via hanging on June the 17th, 2008 at 45 years old. Can I please get a hallelujah? I hope it was painful. I hope he suffered. And I hope he rots in hell. And as you can probably imagine, this case just left such a moral panic throughout Japan. Now, because the media had labelled him as the Otaku Killer, this really made people demonise anime culture. If you liked anime, people were side-eyeing you for a long time because they believed that you might be like the Otaku Killer. People had even turned against horror films and horror manga, things that people had once enjoyed, were now being questioned because it was associated with this monster. In this case, wasn't about anime. This was about a monster who lived in a complete fantasy land, who seen these children as characters in his own sick, twisted comic book. A man who couldn't tell fantasy from reality, an evil monster who never learned empathy, who didn't even know the meaning of that word. And what makes Tsutomu different from these other serial killers that we all see and speak about is the fact that what he was doing was very performative. He was filming, he was photographing, he was editing, he was writing scripts, he was directing this narrative. He was making his own horror films. And of course, there was no alternate personality, there was no Rat Man. This was just an evil, demonic entity in human form, so buried in his own little sick fantasy that reality and humanity just completely stopped existing for him. And as always, I just want to 360 right back round to the victims in this case. Mari, Masami, Erika and Ayako. 4 innocent, beautiful little girls with their whole lives ahead of them that would never ever get to see the future because they were targeted by an evil, vile creature who thought death made him an artist. Please remember their names, remember their faces, remember their story, and send your love, thoughts and prayers to the family members. But my loves, that is it for another true crime and makeup episode. I hope this one was interesting for you. I hope I've maybe been able to shed light on a new case or a lesser known case to you, maybe one you've heard of but never knew the details of. If you do enjoy my content, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It means the world to me. It helps me out so much, and it helps me get a bit closer to the dream of doing this full time and being able to push out the best content for you. Don't forget to leave your case suggestions down below, or you can send them to me via email. Any information you need, whether it's products, social media handles, it is all listed down below in the description for you. But that's it from me today. Please remember, be a good person, do not be a bad person, stay safe, look after each other, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!